Welcome to Spinning Back Clique, where each week here at MMA Junkie, we take a quick spin through the biggest stories in MMA. On today's episode, Nate Diaz and Jorge Masvidal threw down this past Saturday. And no, it isn't 2019. Ilya Topuria versus Max Holloway. I'm in, but what's taking so long to make this fight? And Rose Namajunas is back. She hosts Tracy Cortez in her hometown of Denver on Saturday, and it should be a good one. Hello, everyone. I'm Gorgeous George, and I'm here on the con. And look at the distinguished panel we have for you today. SBC creator and MMA Junkie Radio co-host Goes. He is in the fight capital in Las Vegas, ready to bring it. Well, if it isn't Matt Wells, one of our standout editors, he's back. He's in the Big D, Dallas, Texas. And Nolan King makes his return. The Boston shot caller always delivers when he's on the panel. Cold coffee will be on the ones and twos. But before we get started, if you could kindly hit that like button, Matt Wells would greatly appreciate it. In fact, why stop there? Smash that subscribe button while you're at it. You'll be thanking Nolan King later. All right, guys, I'm still buzzing from this past Saturday. That was a proper combat sports event. 18,000 and change went to the Honda Center in Anaheim, California, and they yelled, they screamed, they taunted, they drank, more yelling, more drinking. Some booze even rained down. A Mexican wave broke out. I mean, they were going this way on two levels. Then they were going in reverse against each other. It was mayhem, guys. I loved it. Diaz versus Masvidal 2 was a hit, a home run, if you will. I want to know your thoughts. You guys are the stars of the show. Matt Wells, what did you think of Diaz versus Masvidal 2, the boxing event?
Well, I'll tell you what, like just based on, your tweet in particular, George, that shot of the crowd, it really showed that, Nate Diaz can draw a decent sized, arena still at this point in his career. And obviously that rivalry with Masvidal was very heated, and the build up to it and everything like that, it made for what I believe came off as a pretty damn good event, an entertaining one even. From watching at home, this felt like a Showtime production. I mean, it pretty much was a Showtime boxing production. Like I was telling you guys in the chat, you replaced the Fanmio logo with Showtime, and it's the same sort of feel that you had when you were sitting there watching at home, minus the issues I had with the stream personally, that it shut off for me on, for half of the fight. But other than that, I mean, it was a fun event. The way it came off, the undercard was actually very entertaining. And then of course the main event was a fun fight as well, back and forth. It wasn't the highest level boxing in the world, of course, because we had two guys knocking on 40 years old, MMA fighters going in there to box with, no threats of a takedown or kicks or anything like that. And obviously we kind of see the striking discrepancy there in the stand-up. But I think it was a fun fight, and I think it came off as entertaining, which at the end of the day, that's what we're here to be, is entertained. And I was thoroughly sports entertained by this event.
Yeah, and it went late into the night too. I felt that, and I was in the time zone of when it happened, but it was late. Nolan King, you were on the worst time zone possible here in the continental United States, but you were tweeting. Looked like you were having fun.
Yeah, just when I thought I was out on the MMA fighters doing boxing thing, I guess I'm stuck back in a little bit. I think that was pretty much a best case scenario. The entertainment was there. Both guys looked pretty good. I wasn't really sure what to expect when guys step outside the UFC and they step outside of the organization that they've been working with for so many years. How motivated will they be in the gym? What will they look like when they get in the ring or the cage? In terms of their physical shape, in terms of their abilities. But it's pretty clear to me, both these guys took this fight very seriously. Their cardio held up great. Their volume was pretty crazy as well. And just, sure, it wasn't the most technical boxing match of all time. I'm not sure any of these guys will be vying for a title in the world of boxing anytime soon. But for me, I thought it was highly entertaining. And really, they can't be mad about what they did on Saturday. I think that the fans got their money's worth. For those that were able to watch, I know Fanmio crashed there for a bit, but great fight all around. Best case scenario, close fight. I'm sure we can maybe dive into the scorecards here in a bit, but overall, I think the main event delivered, and that's the most important thing when you kind of go rogue with one of these pay-per-views like this.
Definitely, we are going to spend some time on this topic. But let's get one more reaction from Goes. You were in the arena, Goes, and we haven't covered too many events lately because we do watch-alongs. The Apex has a lot of shows that we just, don't go to. But man, I think you had the same feeling as me. Just wow.
Well, I'm gonna have to eat a lot of crow. I'm gonna start off with Nolan King. Congratulations, your Boston Celtics. I hate them, but I love you. Second crow serving is gonna be this. I mean, when this fight was made, I thought, why are we doing this? Has already been settled, and we don't really need to see it again, let alone in boxing. As things started progressing, and the YouTube series came out, right, which was their version of kind of like a 24/7. I started to get more into it. When I saw the prices drop, I thought, uh-oh, we might be in trouble here. I couldn't have been more wrong. Being at that arena, even early, it had a good amount of people there early. I thought that was so impressive. They
Yep.
treated it like a proper boxing event. And I feel like if you're a boxing fan that knew nothing about some of the MMA guys that were performing, I think you probably still would have had a good time if you showed up in the arena for some of the reasons that George stated, right? The crowd was just absolutely bananas. I've never seen a wave go in two different directions before in my life. They were into just about every fight. And I couldn't have been more wrong. I mean, it was very, very entertaining. I thought they were brilliant in the way that they sold this. So in bringing in some of, if you're an old school guy like me and you see people like Fernando Vargas, him coming out with his son, Shane Mosley, his son was on the card, right?
Mhm.
Even Ryan Garcia, as controversial as he is, even he was out there, right, with his brother. There was just so much to like about this if you're a combat sports fan, that it was tremendous in the arena. I heard on the broadcast, because I didn't watch it, I was there. I heard Sean O'Malley did his part on the broadcast. He did a brilliant job. And he's an MMA guy, right? Mauro Ranallo, a voice that we're used to hearing on both sides. Like, these guys really put attention into detail. And I think it really played out. I can't wait for something like this to happen again. I don't know that it'll be a home run with just about anybody. You have to have the right combination. And Nate Diaz, he is big part of that equation, right? His following is just tremendous. And all that for not even being a needle mover, right, guys?
Right. That's right. The needle mover. Holy, he was a needle mover on Saturday. That's for sure. Goes, and I'm not sure if you left out Floyd Mayweather. He
Floyd
also
Mayweather was
accompanied
there, yeah.
one of his boxers. So they sprinkled in a little bit for the MMA fan, the boxing fan. I think just someone who's a sports entertainment fan. I bet you there was a lot of people there that were like, "What is this? What are we going to? All right, let's go." But I mean, suites were filled. Like, there was suites that were filled. There was no part where the curtain was blocking to hide empty seats. Nothing, man. 18,000 and change were there, and it was beautiful. I want to go back to something Matt said. Yeah, the crowd, they were good and bad. They did have some boos, and it was ironic because the two guys with the cleanest boxing, Mosley Jr. and Jacobs, were out there being surgical, and throwing very nice techniques, sweet science on display, and they were getting booed. And I think that's because it was an MMA fan that's used to the slobber knocker, the blood, the knees. They weren't getting it. So it was irony there, but hopefully, they also saw that it was a higher level than the people they were there to cheer for. And so hopefully they became boxing fans. Because I think the more boxing fans, the better for MMA, and vice versa as well. But I mean,
George, you know what, though, to that point, I think that was the brilliance of the matchmaking on the card. They kind of made it so they kind of make everyone happy, right? With a mixed martial arts card, if the main event doesn't deliver, you have like 11 more fights that could possibly make you happy. In boxing, it's so tied up in that main event.
yeah.
And they kind of took a page from MMA and they sprinkled different scenarios throughout the card that could kind of maybe make you happy if this didn't play out. And I think that's what was so fun about this card is normally when you go to a boxing fight, especially here in Las Vegas, you're gambling till about 7:30, and then you go, we better get in there.
Yeah.
They didn't make it like that for this card. They made it so that you kind of want to get there relatively early. And I think that was the difference, and it paid out.
I think there was 10 boxing matches, and we walked in on the fourth one, and it was about 80% full. And I could tell, okay, this thing's going to sell out. It was just filling up. Only the suites were kind of not looking empty. But again, those are the people that are getting their $200 steaks. They want to do the grand entrance or whatever. But I mean, the suites filled up. And like I say, it was a hit, man. But key matchmaking: Ryan Garcia's brother, Sean Garcia, versus Fernando Vargas' son, Amado Vargas. Like, you got Oxnard, and I know the Vargases are now in Las Vegas, but they're from Oxnard, which is about an hour and a half away, versus Victorville. Those fans were loud, man. And there was still 4 more fights to get to the main event, but they kind of really, really set the thing going. I can't believe Ryan Garcia personally was there. That is a disgusting human being right now, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I just can't believe he had the balls to show. He kind of shitted on his brother at that time. Call me a soy boy, call me whatever you want, but if you haven't heard what he's been saying, it's just pretty horrific. So I don't understand why he was there, because I wouldn't want to be attached to anybody that was there, sibling or not, at that particular moment, and he got the crowd riled up. Maybe some of the crowd doesn't even know, who knows, but I know. And I just thought it was horrific. So I couldn't believe he was there. But then I see Floyd walk out, and I've never been the biggest fan of Floyd. I've usually cheered for the other guys fighting Floyd, because he really doesn't go for it, but he sells, and he's great defensively and everything. But I was in awe, man. I was watching, go, man, that's one of the greatest walking out. And it was kind of cool that he took a back seat to his boxer and let him shine, but yet still also elevated, So he's like, I always say, pull someone up. When you have some success, pull someone up. And Floyd did it, man. I commend him for that. So like I said, I was just emotions, man, throughout the night, just seeing all this play out. It overwhelmed me, but I was so stoked to be there. As tired as I was by the end of the night, I was really, really happy. But did you catch that, man? The irony in 2 guys that are actually throwing some of the nicest jabs and body shots, they were getting booed, but yet the slobber knockers, the barn burners, the heart stoppers, those types of fights, they were the ones getting cheered. And it just goes to show that if you have a name, that's what matters at the gate and to the fan that walks in and pays their money.
Yeah, this crowd didn't show up to see technical boxing. Come on now. They weren't there for that. They weren't there for the actual, scoring of rounds throughout, a 12-round fight, 10-round fights. They wanted to see somebody go out there and try to knock each other's heads off. And that is not what with Jacobs and Mosley Jr. gave you. They gave you a clean technical boxing match. I mean, dude, we're talking about a former champion in there trying to prove that he can still go against a young lion, and it turned out to be, one of those technical boxing matches where it was like, hey, I'm gonna drag you to these later rounds and see if you can really hang with me. I'm a former champion. I'm trying to prove I can still go. And the younger guy got it, but that is not at all what this crowd was wanting. They knew that the undercard had already provided some electrifying moments, some incredible finishes, stuff like that, some fun moments, and some characters, like you mentioned, like the Floyd Mayweathers of the world and his young boxer, and the Ryan Garcia show, the Sean Garcia show, Amado Vargas, like that fight was amazing. By the way, if you guys didn't see that on the undercard, go back and watch it. Like, that's a fight worth going back and watching. But also the placement of it. So you get a clean technical boxing match before the main event. So there's like, okay, we're not here to see this, and we're also ready to see Nate and Jorge. So get through this, please, and let's get to this main event. So it was like kind of like bad timing mixed with the crowd, who's not really a boxing crowd. But I think that's one thing that boxing as a whole can kind of take away from this, and really take away from MMA, which I think they're actually starting to do more now, especially when you consider what they're trying to do over in Saudi, with Riyadh season. They're trying to fill out a full card for boxing to where you're going to want to watch early. And it's not just the main event that you're tuning in for. They want you to tune in for a whole card, like you do for MMA, like you do for UFC events, week in and week out. You're going to tune in for more than just the main event.
Yeah. Like I say, I even think Dana White was taking notes and regretting that he's not in boxing. He keeps saying boxing, I don't want to dip in. Then you'll see him wear Zuffa boxing. You'll see him support the career of Callum Walsh. He used to train boxers. I just don't understand why he won't use some of the athletes that have either fizzled out or they're just too old or whatever, and do something from that end. I mean, instead of power slap, whatever, whole other topic, but there is something still to be said for a good boxing event, man. And Saturday night proved it. So let's talk about the fight itself. Diaz versus Masvidal. Very controversial scores. I wasn't judging it like a judge. I was just taking it in, watching, seeing one guy with cleaner boxing in Masvidal and another guy with more voluminous boxing in Diaz. But even if you look at the scorecard, or sorry, the the scoring data that was given to us, Masvidal still landed more significant strikes. But at the same time, if you're doing all those in just a few set of rounds, you're not going to win the other rounds. And that's maybe what happened. I mean, basically, it's like they say, it's 10 individual 3-round fights. They get the 10 and the 9. There was no knockdown, so there was no 10-8s or 10-7s or anything. But I was just blown away to hear that Diaz won 8-2 on one judge's scorecard, 7-3 on another judge's scorecard. And I wasn't cheering for a draw, but when I heard 95-95, I go, yeah, that sounds about right to me, because that's kind of what I was watching. One guy that just had a ton of volume, and the crowd would really go nuts. It would pop every time he would throw 10 punch combos, even if some of them were just pitter patter. And I can imagine judges kind of getting influenced by that a little bit as well. But how did you guys score it? What did you guys think of the judging? Careful with that word, robbery. I'm not always a big fan of it, but I understand it's in play here. Nolan, what do you think?
Yeah, I had it as a draw, and I said I kind of hated myself to kind of come to that scorecard, because it does seem like a cop out, right? Two guys have a great fight. Oh, it's a draw, yay. But I felt that was, that when you're scoring these fights, right, and you kind of have these close rounds, in your head, you start to think, all right, well, I scored round 3 for, Masvidal, but it could have gone Diaz's way, or I scored round 3 for Diaz and it could have gone Masvidal's way. You start having that internal calculator. And for me, I felt like it had to be either a draw, or some of those rounds that I maybe leaned towards Diaz could have also gone towards Masvidal. So I felt like, having watched that fight, that there was a very good chance that it would either be a draw or Masvidal. So to hear that one judge had an 8-round difference for Diaz, I was very surprised by. Really what this came down to, George, and you said it there, this was a classic example of volume versus quality versus quantity. Diaz was landing a lot of shots. Masvidal seemed to be throwing significantly less, but when he did, he was getting reactions out of Diaz, and maybe more reactions than we've seen from Nate in a while. Granted, Nate usually just walks right through everything, and he kind of still did that here, but you could tell some of those punches, the body shots, the punches to the head, they were hurting. Those were significant shots. So I can't really argue with the draw. Maybe even if they had a Diaz by a 1-round advantage or a 2-round advantage, maybe. But to kind of have these massively lopsided scorecards, I think I couldn't see it going that way. And so, yeah, man, it's tough. I feel like we obviously have a big problem in MMA. I'm a casual boxing fan, but seeing all the people that I trust in the boxing world talk about the judging there, it seems like potentially even worse. So not necessarily surprising per se, but I definitely thought Jorge, if you were to score the fight as a whole, which I know that's not the way you do it, I thought Jorge did the most damage. I thought he landed the biggest shots and had the biggest moments.
Mm-hmm. All right, Goes, have you had a chance to catch your breath and think about what you witnessed, maybe gone over the fight again? I think I kind of know where you're headed. Same thing as me. It didn't look like no 8-2, 7-3 either way. It looked more of a parity fight. But what were your thoughts on the scoring?
I agree with Nolan. When I heard that first card, I said, you know what, that's probably that could be very possible, because I do remember halfway through the fight looking at George and going, I think we're even here at this point. They were almost trading rounds. Jorge did hit him with the more meaningful shots. He worked the body a lot, but Diaz did overwhelm him with volume. And I think Jorge Masvidal might have been caught up too much in trying to be a boxer. And I think that might have hurt him a little bit. It seemed like he was conserving his energy. He was exploding for 20, 30 seconds at a time and then kind of taking his foot off the gas. I think this is the problem when you have mixed martial artists doing boxing. I think the judges have a difficulty trying to score those types of fights. And what I mean by that is, like, when you have boxers who have a history and you kind of know what they've been through, right? So like if Floyd Mayweather, you don't know how many punches hit that guy's gloves, right? And at no point do you go, oh, he might be hurt, or, he's just covering up. Like, you know what he's doing. He's setting you up so that he could hit you on the counter. But when you don't have a history like that for like a Jorge Masvidal, you might actually think, I think he's hurt. I think he's just covering up. And I think that's what kind of makes it a little difficult for some of these judges to box these or to judge these types of boxing fights. It's not good for you to just sit back there and cover up like that, especially when you're in a hostile environment where 90% of the arena is cheering for the other guy. I could see how people could get a little confused, but everybody around me, we kind of, at the end of the fight, we all looked at each other and we all kind of went, Masvidal, maybe not by much, but maybe by a round or two or something like that. But to have it 7-3 the other way, I don't really understand that judging wise, but I kind of understand. It just felt like the crowd was judging that fight that night.
Exactly.
It really did. Those two cards, I feel like if they just passed out cards like at a movie premiere and they go, hey, what'd you think who won? That's probably what they would say. It didn't feel like a judge's scorecard. And that's unfortunate, because there's so much on the line for each fighter, and especially Jorge Masvidal in this particular instance. It's just not a good look, man. I don't know. I thought it was a lot closer. And I don't have a problem. If you say Diaz won the fight, I'd say maybe I can make an argument for that. But to be that much of a landslide, no.
Matt Wells, how'd you feel about the scorecards? How'd you score it?
I think, well, as I mentioned earlier, I didn't get to see the entire fight in full. Thanks to Cameo, but I'll just remind some folks, there is a very clear difference in boxing scoring versus MMA scoring. And that's probably why we saw what we saw on the scorecards. In boxing, you're going to see judges favor more active fighters more often. They're going to favor ring generalship a lot more. They're going to weigh that a lot heavier because that's significant in boxing. So the fighter that's, really controlling the fight, setting the tone, so to speak, the fighter that is, as it says on the scoring criteria, that puts himself in a position to score and not be scored upon. And it felt like, from the later rounds that I saw, when my stream finally kicked back in, it felt like that's what Nate was doing for the later half of the fight, or the last 3 or 4 rounds of the fight. So I'm not sure what quite really happened there in the middle. It sounded like, from what I was gathering, as the fight was going on through Twitter and social media, that it was like what Goes was saying, that the bigger shots, or that Nolan was saying that the bigger shots were coming from Jorge, while Nate was just throwing the volume. And again, like, that's what judges like in boxing sometimes. If you're throwing a lot of volume out there, that's going to win you rounds. And it seems like that's what Nate was doing. And I guess that's what we should have expected from Nate. Nate's never been a real heavy puncher. He was like that in MMA. Same with Nick. They were known as guys that were going to go in there and just pepper you with a lot of punches, a lot of strikes, 30-40% power strikes, and then just overwhelm you. And of course, the thing that you can't teach at all is that they have iron chins. So they're going to walk through anything that you hit them with. And that's from what I saw in a lot of those highlights. Jorge was hitting Nate with some big shots, but Nate was like, okay.
I'm glad you brought that up. I'm glad you brought it up, because if you just look at the aesthetics, Jorge hit him with cleaner boxing punches, the technique, everything. But Nate ate him, and it was almost like it was nothing. So for that one moment when the judge is taking into consideration what he's watching, he's probably not feeling that the punch was as effective as maybe the rest of us. Mm-hmm. And yet when Nate was doing pitter patter, because Jorge would just cover up and not bob and weave and just kind of take it, it almost looked like poor defense by a guy that's getting hit by something he can't defend. And so the aesthetics made it look like those punches were even more effective than they weren't. I saw them both at the end of the fights, and Jorge wasn't marked up at all. I mean, he really looked like he was fine. Nate looked like, hey, I've been in a fight here, and he even gave Jorge credit that, yeah, the dude can hit, but it wasn't his night. He would pivot and say whatever he had to say, but he did give credit that he was in there with the dog. But I'm glad you also mapped out the scoring criteria. It is different in boxing. I've seen that as well. The general ringmanship or something like that, the activities. So, and we've been so conditioned in the last 2 years, damage in mixed martial arts. I think that's why maybe I was programmed to just think, oh, that was a damaging hook, that was a damaging shot to the body or whatever. But yeah, it was really, really confusing. Didn't take away from the event. Now they're 1-1. What's next for each guy, guys? Nolan, what do you do with Jorge Masvidal next? He was the losing party, but it is 1-1.
Yeah, I mean, he seems like he's going to try to go back to MMA. I mean, I think that's the vibe that I'm getting. I think he said it in an interview, I believe, with you guys, right? Right, George?
Yeah, he did
Yeah.
leave that open. Yeah.
Yeah, so I am curious if there would be interest on the UFC's end. Obviously, he's still under contract with them. You know, I don't know what kind of fights they would make for him, or what his motives would be, other than just maybe getting some, you know, paychecks and getting some more fights in his career. But I definitely think that would probably be a better avenue for him at this point. I'm not sure what other matches are out there. I mean, I guess, hey, like him and, you know, Jake Paul or something. I mean, that's always there, but that's kind of, you know, there's only one guy. I guess now there's two that Jake Paul has scheduled at once, you know, with him fighting Mike Perry and then Mike Tyson. But outside of that, if he can't land that, I think going back to the UFC wouldn't be the craziest thing. But the thing is, like, he's got his promotion going on too, which I think has filled has added something kind of interesting to the combat sports space. I think the bare knuckle MMA, getting some of those veteran guys that maybe don't have a home, like they're too good to fight on the regionals, but you know, PFL doesn't want them. You know, I think there's a middle ground there to get some of the you know, the JDSs of the world and the Roy Nelsons of the world to kind of have them in, you know, some sort of fighting opportunity. So I don't think he really needs to be doing this anymore. Do I think he will? Yeah, I think he'll probably come back. And I think if he's already saying it's going to be the UFC, I think it's either now or maybe one more boxing match and then he's there.
Yeah. I like Darren Till for Jorge Masvidal. They got history. Do it in England.
Yeah.
I don't know. How about you guys? What do you do with Nate Diaz? He seems to have more doors open.
Whew, man, I got to imagine Jake Paul's probably licking his chops, right? Seeing how much money he could make in a rematch here. Nate does have a lot of options, right? He can do that with Jake Paul. Hell, even a rematch with Jorge Masvidal. We talked to Masvidal after the fight, and he said he wants that rubber match in boxing. He says he's a sore loser. If you do that, you know, I can't remember if it was Nolan or Matt that said it, but, you know, maybe in Florida, maybe in Vegas, where now you get a whole different crowd. You could definitely do something like that. He does have possibilities and a lot of cards to play in mixed martial arts, but I'll be honest, guys, I feel like that's getting further and further away. If you were in that arena and you saw how much it popped and how many people he brought to the show and how much of the money he's pocketing, I don't know that he wants to go back to the UFC and give them back that power. I think he's kind of happy calling the shots and doing what he can here, and he does have options. So remember, he's not a spring chicken, right? This ain't gonna last forever. So I think those possibilities in MMA will always be there, but they're getting further and further away with the success of what he's doing outside of the cage.
Man, every time you guys say that, I'm 15 years older than these guys, and if they're not spring chickens, then I'm like some desert tortoise or something. But all right, sorry, Matt Wells, you get stuck with the not so popular fighter of the three that came from MMA. How about Anthony Pettis? He lost to Chris Avila. Man, wherever he goes, he does seem to get paid. He always lands on his feet, but this wasn't the best showing for Pettis. What would you do with him next?
I would do anything that involves him having the ability to kick, because without that, it's just not the same guy that we all know and love. You know, he needs to be able to throw some kicks in there. I mean, he was entertaining, I think, when he did the karate thing. It's Anthony Pettis. It's weird. It's a mixed bag with him. You don't necessarily know what you're going to get at this point. I mean, just look at his record. You see a win over Roy Jones and a loss to Chris Avila. That's a very stark contrast. Yes. and just on paper, it's crazy. So, I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't put it past Anthony Pettis. And I know, like, as much as I hate this, he just seems like a guy that's going to do anything at this point. I would not be surprised to see Anthony Pettis show up on Power Slap, honestly.
Really?
as much as I
thought you were going to say bare knuckle.
Yeah. I mean, either one. I mean, he could do bare knuckle, you know. I think Anthony Pettis and, Mike Perry could be a thing that we see in bare knuckle as well. Who knows? He's one of those guys at this point. He just seems to have fun doing any and everything combat sports related. So I wouldn't put it past him to do anything at this point.
Yeah. I don't know. He lands on his feet though. He got paid well at PFL.
Yeah.
And he got the Roy Jones Jr. fight, and he got this one. And Junkie released the salaries. I know somebody was giving us a shout out here in the chat room that accompanies the show, and I'll get to a few of those comments and questions right now. But yeah, I mean, like I say, he just always seems to land on his feet. But in this showing, he didn't look that good. And the guy he lost to doesn't carry the name. Like if you lose to Roy Jones Jr. in boxing, you go, what do you want? The guy's Roy Jones Jr. But Chris Avila, you lost to him, and the fight wasn't that good, and you also didn't look good. I don't know. I mean, I always want these guys to make money where they can because their names are most valuable at the tail end of their career, unfortunately, when they aren't what they used to be. Joseph Bosa says they were smart to move the date when they did. 18,000 fans were there from the word go. Yeah, man, it was pretty much like you said. Lazy Bed says similar cast of characters to Showtime too. Matt Wells was bringing that up. Mauro Ranallo, Brian Campbell, Josh Thompson, Amanda Guerra. So I'm sure some of that did carry over. Mark England says Connor made more than both boxers put together. That's madness. Well, yeah, I think what he's referring to is not the fight versus Floyd, where he got 100 million supposedly. He's actually saying that Connor, he bet on Nate Diaz 500,000 at like plus 220 odds or something like that. So I think he took home 1.6 million. So that was interesting. A former foe, one that he's lost to as well, is beaten. But he put that aside. He put some money out there. And yes, there's always these disclaimers that we put on MMA Junkie, but I'll just say it to you guys. What you saw, which was Nate Diaz getting 500 and Jorge Masvidal getting 300,000, that's not in addition to pay-per-view. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure they also take some sort of a cut because they're actually the promoters of the event as well. Not the entire, they didn't do the entire promoting. They had a share in the promoting. So I'm sure there was different monies that they made that way. Being able to walk in with a robe and promote something as well, your shorts, the canvas. I mean, they were dipping into a lot of things. And so back to what Goza's saying, do they really want to go back to MMA when they just put on one hell of a show like they did and they had such a big hand in wearing what they wanted, walking out to whatever they wanted with however many people they wanted? You know what I'm saying? Like, that's probably hard to turn away from. So I almost feel like they may say it, but they don't mean it. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I don't know. Let's move on. If I see some more comments, we'll get back to it. This is basically the big topic of the show. And again, it was pretty amazing. But there's other stuff going on in combat sports. The featherweight division of the UFC, right? So you got a proper champion in Ilia Topuria who beat an incumbent. This wasn't like a vacant title that he won or someone retired. No, he actually unseated a great champion in Alexander Volkanovski. Ilia Topuria is undefeated. I mean, honestly, like we got ourselves a pretty solid situation here. And then what happens? Max Holloway goes out and wins in a BMF fight in another weight class. I get it. But still, this was epic for Ilia Topuria, in my opinion, and the featherweight division. He was 0-3 against Volkanovski, but now there's a new champ. This thing just looks like it's going to be a great matchup to make, right? Pay-per-views, they tick that box. Personalities. I think it's everything you could ever ask for. Now, Topuria said in Spanish, I saw him do, there was a quick little post on Twitter, but because I know Spanish, I'll tell you what he says. When he was asked about it, he says, "It's not because of me. They called me to tell me that the holdup is Holloway. Family issues, having trouble dropping weight, and wanting to compete at a higher class." So he says, it's not on me. But then Holloway responded to that on Twitter, and he says he made it quick. He had a meme, a GIF. He says, "Guy is just making things up at this stage. I've been ready." Guys, what is happening here? Why are we having trouble booking this thing? Matt Wells?
I think it's just timing, with a lot of these fight bookings, especially a big one like that, because that would be a massive card or a massive main event for a card. It's just finding the right timing and the right, location for that kind of fight, because that would be a big one, man. And of course, if Max says he's ready for it, then you got to believe him, because he's a guy that has a lot of options at his disposal. He's been winning. He won the BMF at 55, a moment of the year in that buzzer beater knockout of Justin Gaethje at a higher weight class. So he can really, potentially stay at 155 for more big fights, chase the title there, or go back down and immediately have a fight, because who knows what would happen with the lightweight title picture. Could we see him step in, against Makhachev like right now? I wouldn't put it past the UFC to do it, but it's more likely that Holloway versus Topuria is a thing that could happen a lot easier and a lot sooner. It should be something that happens, here in Q3, Q4 of this year, just what card, what event, what location? Those are the answers that the UFC is probably, trying to wrap their head around and figure out how to build an event around those two stars. Because Topuria, as we've seen, he comes off like a mega star already after just winning the title. Max Holloway, as we already know, his legacy in the sport as one of the greatest featherweight champions of all time, arguably. A lot of people want to throw Volk in that conversation, and that's very valid. But man, Max has built this legacy. He's a fan favorite. Everybody loves to see him fight. And more often than not, he comes and delivers, as we've seen, regardless of weight class at this point too. So he is incredibly entertaining. And if this is the fight that they do, I think for the UFC, it just comes down to when and where. And I think that that's probably the fight that they want to do the most.
Nolan, do you think they are handling Topuria's success and, he's an incredible asset for them? Do you think the UFC is handling him in the correct way? He won it in February, but some of that steam's already kind of fallen off. Again, he took out the great Alexander Volkanovski, and he looked like he was pretty healthy and ready to go. He's got a couple countries behind him, not just Spain, where he's resided for most of his life, half of his life, but he's from Georgia as well. And, he represents that country well. So you could just think they could make a huge splash in Europe. Either country. The UFC hasn't been to either country. What is taking so long? I mean, he's got a plethora. You can run it back of opponents. You can run it back with Volkanovski. You can go with Holloway, who's the hot ticket. Hell, even Brian Ortega, prior to, his latest problems, he went out to Mexico City and took out, an interim champ as well. What's going on here? Who's missing the boat?
Yeah, it's interesting. I honestly, right now, it seems like there's kind of a log jam with the UFC in terms of the bigger fights, right? And this is all a big puzzle trying to figure out, think about it from their perspective, right? They have a certain amount of pay-per-views between, September and December, and they have to figure out which title fights go where and who's going to be ready and who's, yada, yada, yada. So it is one big puzzle. It seems like we're getting to a point where they're going to have to put the pieces together. I mean, we've known about Izzy and Dricus kind of being on that August date for a little while, but to not really have anything in the sphere in September, nothing with this, targeted Utah card in Salt Lake City, nothing in Abu Dhabi, nothing in New York City, although it sounds like John Jones will probably be the guy for that. And then obviously you have the end of the year show in Vegas as well. So I think we'll find out soon exactly. It's hard for me to judge right now because I honestly don't know what's going on. I think a lot of the fighters involved also kind of don't know what's going on. I think if Topuria beats Max, Q1 pay-per-view in Spain has to be a must. And I know Spain's a little bit underdeveloped. I know it seems like it is a priority for the UFC, but you don't know what really goes into that, into putting on an event there. I know when Ilya negotiated this past fight with Volk, I believe Hunter Campbell flew out to Spain to go out there and kind of take a lay of the land in addition to talking with him. So it's certainly something that I believe they initially were hoping for this year. Now it sounds like it's going to be at the end of the beginning of next year. But there is a risk reward here. I mean, Topuria can elevate himself to the next level by beating a guy like Max Holloway. I know winning over Alexander Volkanovski is already impressive, but putting Max Holloway on your resume as well, that would be a hell of a lot of momentum going into Spain, a place where the interest maybe hasn't been huge in MMA, but now it is. I mean, we see all the news outlets over there that are covering Topuria and putting him right next to soccer, football. So I think there's the massive opportunity here, and it's really going to be on Ilya. If he does fight Max Holloway in October, he'll have the ability to really elevate himself and make him be a torchbearer for MMA in a country that really hasn't had that spark yet. So massive stuff. I don't necessarily know who fumbled what or whatever. It sounds to me like both these guys are probably ready to compete by the end of the year, and it's just a matter of putting them both on a calendar on the date, getting a location in, and we'll sit back and enjoy it as fans.
Goes, if they do go with Topuria versus Holloway at the Sphere in Spain, wherever, who does that leave out? Because maybe I should have even thrown in Diego Lopez, his name. He's so popular, and then obviously him and Ige did something that was incredible, with that whole switch of opponent. And he's exciting. He goes out there and he really does exciting things inside the octagon. Then you got Movsar Evloev, who's undefeated. I think he's 8-0 in the UFC. Aljamain Sterling, a former champion at bantamweight, who moved up and took out a top contender in Calvin Kattar, and of course Volkanovski himself. Out of all these names, right, who would be the two you would pair up to say, okay, the winner of this fight gets the winner of that other one that still hasn't been made?
That is such a hard question to answer because, you look at a guy like Lopez, right? And he has a lot of momentum, but I don't feel like he's there yet. I feel like one more fight, maybe even two. We still don't know if he's that level. Like the guys that we're talking about are top notch. So I think you can't really protect fighters at this point, especially in a division like this. But you might have to give him a shot. Maybe, I like Evloev. I think he's incredible. I like rest for Volkanovski. I think that's the best thing. And I think if he could sit out a little bit longer, he's always going to have his opportunity. But really, man, I just want to see Topuria fight. I want to see him back out there. I want to see him with Max Holloway. You guys hit the nail on the head. It's like you have a star here. Every week, somebody is laying their gloves down on the canvas. And you have to replace those people. And you have a guy who is never short of making comments, right? Like Topuria does not stop. Whatever the topic is, he's got an opinion. He is trying to be a star for you, but that flame is going to start to fizzle out a little bit because he's not in the cage where he's the most impressive for all of us to sit there and want to watch this guy, to order pay-per-views. I want to see this kid fight, man. Get him in there ASAP. I think Joseph Bosa in the chat said, hey, man, this might have to do with dollar and cents. And sometimes it probably does, right? Whether it's on the Holloway side or the Topuria side, it could very well be that. But I don't know that that's worth shelving these guys. Like, I really want to see them fight. Whoever's next after that, it's tough, man. You really have to stand out. Volkanovski, I mean, he'll do anything, right? You don't have to worry about him. But the other three guys, Aljamain Sterling included, you really, really have to speak up and make a case for why you should be next. And even then, it's not guaranteed, especially with a guy like Alexander Volkanovski who could jump right back in at any moment.
Yeah. Josh Wallace in the chat saying they haven't secured Spain yet. And I do have a comment on this or an opinion on this. Stadium show, I would love to see it, right? But Dana's always talked about the struggles with stadium shows. He's not the biggest fan. And all the stadium shows that they've had, Conor McGregor was never once on them, and he never got his stadium show at Krug Park. So I hope people don't get too married to it has to happen that way. If it can't happen, then let's just have it in an arena, but let's keep it going. Because, like I say, Topuria can explode in popularity, but he has to keep fighting, and he's not fighting. All right, guys, this past weekend, obviously, we didn't have an MMA event, but the news cycle never stops. In fact, it produced some decent matchups, and I want to know which one of those matchups caught your eye that you want to put some shine on. Let's go back to Matt Wells. What pairing got you going?
I am really happy to see that the UFC found an opponent for Drew Dober. He was supposed to fight Mike Davis. Now I was really excited about that matchup because Mike Davis is an exciting fighter, but so is Drew Dober. And that's why I'm glad that he has a fight and he still has one against an exciting opponent in John Silva, who came off of a very nice finish, but he also missed weight. So now he gets to kind of make it up to the UFC by stepping up on short notice, higher weight class against an exciting opponent. So I don't know if it's as much of a, hey, I'm going to make it up to you, UFC, or the UFC is like, hey, you get Drew Dober now. I'm not sure if it's like kind of a punishment reward sort of thing, but it should be an exciting one.
How about you, Nolan?
Yeah, I love the Paris matchup between Renato Moicano and Benoit Saint Denis. I think that's one of those ones. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, too. It's one thing to put a great lightweight fight on a card between contenders in a co-main event and have it be 3 rounds. But to go and book this one for 5, I don't think we might not need it. Benoit Saint Denis seems to just put his foot on the gas pedal no matter who he's fighting and not really care about his own safety at times. So I wouldn't be shocked if we need only 2 rounds for this one. But great fight, definitely a banger. Seems like a little unclear if it will headline or if it will be one of those 5-round co-main scenarios. But either way, man, that's a fantastic fight. That environment's going to be pretty electric now that Benoit's leveled up a little bit too. To kind of get, I'm sure that the French fans, which I think right now are kind of the pound for pound, we're talking, Dana White wants to talk about pound for pound fans right now, and pound for pound environments, definitely Paris. So I expect it to be electric in there, and Moicano, I think, will seize the moment as well. I think we've seen him cut some WWE promos. I think he can play the heel too. We really haven't seen that, but I'm sure it's coming.
Yeah. Renato Moicano is like a likable heel too. I think he can actually play off that and say, I'm going to mess your boy up, but still come off likable because, again, he's kind of controversial and his little shtick going on, Money Moicano and all that. But I don't know. A lot of times I find him, interesting, likable or whatever. Other times I'm rolling my eyes, but I'm paying attention. Goes, how about you? What's your matchup?
He's a lot like Merab Dvalishvili, right? Like wherever you plug him in,
corny kind of.
He's gonna have fans. When I saw Michael Morales get booked, he got booked against Neil Magny. This dude is must watch TV, right? I love watching this kid fight. He's young. I think it's test time, right? Like, let's see if he can jump into the next level. And I think Neil Magny for that level is the final boss. He's got to get through that guy, and he's got to show us that he can make that jump into the next echelon of fighters. But I mean, I think Neil's going to be a tough out. He's got that range. He's pretty good everywhere. I think Morales, we're going to learn a lot about him in this fight, and I'm excited to see him fight again.
Solid matchmaking, guys, all the way around. Or solid choices, other matchmaking, guys. But now I got one, but got a bone to pick with this one. It was Mark Diaz, who we did a story saying, hey, I signed elsewhere, and so he's going to fight Tim Wild. So now they're part of PFL, who now owns Bellator. And here's what I don't like about this matchup. I'm just thinking, you got yourself your UFC guy who had quite a few fights in the UFC. Why not just grab AJ McKee and say, can you beat the UFC guy? And if so, get over on those fans and keep. You've had AJ McKee for 10 years, 20 some fights, and that kid honestly should be a way bigger star than he is now. He's been a world champion. He's won a Grand Prix. I don't know. He's in the midst of that Grand Prix or whatever. And I think he did win the Grand Prix. He did. And so I just don't understand it. But what does this matchup do? It doesn't do anything. Like, both guys are just kind of fulfilling a contract. That's not how you make a splash with a guy that you just signed. Do like when you did, the PFL guys. They would come over. It was different. They kind of were handcuffed, right? But Pettis might have helped make a star out of Clay Collard or whatever. But in this instance, like, they've just been languishing for so long, and I think it has to do with some of this, man. I would have went like with an AJ McKee or whatever. So that was a pairing that I wanted to point out for another reason. I don't know. I don't like it. I think use that talent that you signed, and either he shows you what's up, where he came from. He was successful there, and he's going to be successful here, or he puts over your guy. Were you going to say something, Matt?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the idea behind that matchup was that they want to get a highlight out of Mark Diaz and PFL gloves to promote the next season when he enters. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess you might be right. But I guess it has to do with this past weekend and BKFC, and their success, and Karate Con. There's so many things going on out there that I just feel like these promotions are going to keep continuously falling behind. And let's not forget, there's this tornado that comes through for 10 weeks every year called Dana White Contender Series, and it's going to get started, right? And it's becoming that some of those fights are starting to matter more because some guys are getting crowned world champions coming off that season. And some of these other leagues that I personally want to have success are just, like I say, languishing, just kind of surviving, hoping, praying to get eyeballs, and they're on, PFL's on proper ESPN right now. They should have way more of a splash. Strikeforce made way bigger of a splash back in the day when they did their 6 or 8 events per year. And that's why the UFC wound up buying them, because they had some of those names to sign and bring back into their promotion, those names that mattered. I want PFL to succeed. It'll push the UFC, but not with a matchup like this. There are fights this weekend in Denver, Colorado. Like I said, Rose Namajunas versus Tracy Cortez. I want to know, guys, first of all, tell me what you think about this fight. Nolan, is this a title eliminator for 125 pounds, Tracy Cortez versus Rose Namajunas? Why should we watch?
Yeah, I think, honestly, it's a big fight for Rose in the title picture. And then I think outside of that, you got Manon Ferrell there. So I think this is probably 2 fights away from a title, whatever that is, a title eliminator. For Tracy Cortez, this is a huge spot. I think there's obviously she gets a lot of attention. She's somebody that has fought somewhat in terms of actually seeing her in the cage. I think she's been somewhat inconsistent in her appearances in getting to actually fight. But once in there, she's a good fighter. And now she's getting a massive jump up. She's somebody that if she wins, will have a massive push from the UFC, I'm sure. But it is a dangerous fight. So it's kind of a win-win for Tracy, in my opinion. And for Rose, she's fighting somebody that's dangerous in a fight that won't earn her a title fight, in my opinion. So I think it just reestablishes herself. It gets her one step closer, and maybe again maybe they'll run the Barber fight back or have her fight somebody else. But to me, it's an important fight, but I'm not sure I would give it like the stakes of really having a championship impact.
Mm-hmm. Matt, we usually wait till the end of the week till our fight analyst Dan Tom gives us a pick, but give us an early preview. Which way you leaning in this fight? We all have to turn in staff picks, so we've all kind of come to a conclusion at this point who we think is going to win, barring we see anything during the fight week that has us change our mind.
Yeah, I haven't submitted my picks just yet, but I am leaning towards Tracy Cortez winning this fight.
Really? Stop it, Matt. Really?
I'm going back and forth with it, but that's who I'm leaning to. I mean, she hasn't lost a fight since 2017, I believe. You know, she goes in there and figures it out, you know, and you can say that a lot about Rose, obviously, former champion. You know, she goes in there and she studies her opponents, obviously, and she, you know, is really, really savvy with her striking and, you know, figuring out her opponents. So it's a really intriguing matchup, man, and it's hard to pick. And that's why I really like it as a main event. I know I've seen some people complain saying it's not the best main event in the world, but I mean, it's a really, really good fight. And I'm glad it's 5 rounds because it gives both of them the time to figure each other out and make those adjustments and then see what happens in round 4 and round 5. I don't necessarily think we're going to see a finish here, but I think what we're going to see is a high level mixed martial arts fight. And it's really going to prove to the UFC, hey, like the winner here, if somebody actually does find a finish even, or, you know, wins a very decisive decision, like it's going to be a real statement opportunity for both of them to really jump that line. Because like it was mentioned before, Manon Fiorot is right there. She deserves that title shot as well. So it's going to be an interesting opportunity for both ladies here to really make a statement and really prove that, hey, I'm ready for that title shot.
Karate Ted Tunes is disagreeing, Matt. He says Rose will overwhelm Tracy with speed. Tracy gets hit a lot. Are you with Karate Ted Tunes or are you with Matt Wells?
Yeah, I love Matt Wells. Why are you trying to create a rift here? I guess I'm with Ted. I kind of agree. Tracy's going to show up, man. That's the one thing. You know, she's going to show up. She's going to apply pressure early on. Can she keep that up for the duration of the fight? Can she make the adjustments when they're needed, right? We know that Rose can do that. I feel like she may overwhelm Tracy. I think this is the type of fight that Tracy does need, though. But at the end of the day, I think Rose just may have too many tools for her. And I don't think there'll be a finish, but I think she'll probably win a decision.
Matt, she's used to the altitude. She's fought a lot of 5-round fights. She's at home. I don't know. You think Tracy's gonna win this fight? You're sticking with that pick? Because you caught me off guard when you said that. I thought it was just like the token question I asked, the layup.
No, like I said, it's close, man. It's close. It's not an easy pick for me, and I would not be surprised if Rose won. But you know, you kind of got to make a pick. You can't ride the fence on the staff picks, man. You got to go one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'm actually last in staff picks, so I really shouldn't be coming at anybody. I have no right to do that. I'm very, very far behind. I'm trying to catch Danny Segura for crying out loud. But all right, well, that one really caught me off. I thought it was going to be like the headline was going to say unanimous main event. Here are the staff picks or whatever. A quick shout out to Farah Hanoun, Mike Bond, and I think Ken Hathaway. Somehow this fucking guy, our producer, he's like the only guy that's won it twice, and he makes it sound like I kind of don't follow it as much as you guys or whatever. We're always saying Kenny pop on camera, but he's always at the top of the leaderboard, and somehow he snuck his way up. Remember, Mike was dominating, and then Farah caught him, and then today I had to like clear my eyes. I was like, what? How can he get back up there? So I don't know. We'll have to maybe pay attention to what Kenny says when his picks are posted.
Right?
Yeah.
From this card, what else do you guys like that you want to give some shine to? Pick one you want to highlight.
I like the Julian Erosa Christian Rodriguez fight. I think, there's already a little bit of smack talk between the two of them, which kind of makes it fun. Erosa is Jekyll and Hyde. Sometimes he can go out there and he can be technical, and then sometimes he just doesn't give an F, and he he'll throw a flying knee or something. It depends on which one shows up. I think if he can kind of mix the two, he'll probably come out with a victory. But that one is kind of got me my ears perked up, although they kind of already perk up by themselves. But the trash talk, man, that got me.
Nolan, how about you?
Charles Johnson and Josh Van's probably my favorite fight on the card, but I got to give some shine to Jasmine Jasudavicius versus Fatima Klein. I think both of them with some gangster moves this past week. Fatima was preparing for the Contender Series. She gets a call up a weight class at elevation on about 9 days' notice to fight the 15th ranked fighter in that division. She says sure, and then conversely, Jasmine Jasudavicius, has her opponent fall off, and she gets offered this super prospect that everybody's talking about as the best female prospect outside the UFC. And she says, sure. So very interesting fight, kind of a lot of weird intangibles here. But Jasmine Jasudavicius has an opportunity here to kind of silence the hype on Fatima Klein, who, if you don't necessarily follow the regional scene, somebody that people are saying might be a future champion down the line, main training partner of Aaron Blanchfield. Some people in that circle I talked to say they're kind of, neck and neck in a lot of those training sessions. So at 6-0, it's a pretty good place to be when you're entering the UFC, going at it with a flyweight contender. And I'm excited to see what she can do against a really tough test in Jasudavicius.
Lazy bed in the chat says he likes Fatima Klein as well. Chris goes wild. He's on the other side. He hopes Jasmine Jasudavicius wins. JK, shout out to you. Thank you for the nice comment that you left. Somebody else that also agreed with the other pick. The other fight that was thrown out, Joshua Van and Charles Johnson, is Lazy Bed and Steve Williams. Yeah, I like that one too. But it's Matt Wells' turn. Matt, what's a fight that you want to give some shine to from the UFC Denver card?
Man, I really like that Fatima Klein fight as well. But I will go with this matchup because it's interesting where both of these guys are coming off of. They're both coming off of fights against very, very highly hyped, UFC pushed guys. Cody Brundage is coming off of that fight against Bo Nickel. Mm-hmm. Abdul Razak Al Hassan is coming off that fight against Joe Pyfer. Both of those guys lost in the second round to their opponents. They both got finished. So this is a big opportunity for both of these gentlemen here in Al Hassan and Brundage to bounce back and do it in a big way against each other. And I think it's going to be one of those exciting fights, man, because Brundage is going to have to watch out for that big power. Can Al Hassan deal with the wrestling? Cody Brundage. I just like the matchup, especially considering what they're coming off of in their last fights.
Nice. All right. And then in the last question, Matt talked about the booking of John Silva and Drew Dober because it really did get added late. Mm-hmm. But I love it. I love the fight booking. But in this case, I love the matchup. Just two hard hitters on ESPN. No NHL, no NBA. NFL hasn't even started yet. I think they're reporting to camp or who knows what they're doing. The soccer leagues, same thing. In fact, if you think about it, Copa America and the Euros, all they got is like third place games early Saturday. The big finals are on Sunday, I think. So there's really almost just MLB as your opposition. And so the UFC, I think, was smart to take two heavy-handed strikers to go out there and put on a show. I love that matchup. John Silva, like I say, just fought and just won, and Drew Dober fights never suck. So I love that matchup. I love the fight booking, and hopefully the UFC can kind of see where there's different spots, that they can do this, and really, really flex. And I think this is a big chance for them. It wasn't the greatest card a couple weeks ago, but they've tweaked it a little bit, and I think it can actually sneak up on us and be great. The one thing they always had was a great main event. Even when they had the reshuffle of the deck, Macy Barber, it would have been nice to see her, but it turned out to be Tracy Cortez stepping up. But I think it's going to be a great main event and a great card at the end of the day. All right, guys, outstanding job as always. Nolan, it killed me for 60 minutes to stare at that Boston Celtics banner, but I tip my hat. You guys did it. I think this is what, number 18? You guys lead us by one, right?
By one. And look at that. Look at what Cold Coffee's got going there at the bottom rolling right now, huh? Just trying to instigate.
It hurts. It really hurts us, dude.
Yeah, dude. Check out the show Winning Time on Max. And it talks about did you ever see it, Nolan?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, wasn't it great?
It's great.
Even
great.
Though it was more Laker oriented. It talks about that rivalry of the Lakers and the Celtics. It was a heated rivalry in the 80s. And then they butted heads again one more time in the first decade of the 2000s, but it just kind of shows you what those rivalries were like, and Larry Bird and Magic Johnson or whatever. But like I said, I got to keep it real. Boston went out there and they were very, very impressive. So congrats on that.
And now they can make another episode about the in-season champions and all they accomplished, and the actual champions, and compare the banners, and
it was more fun pre-show when your mic
though,
wasn't working. You know that, right?
Wouldn't it have to be season 9 though? You'd have to go through a pretty big dynasty to get there, right?
Don't tempt me. Don't tempt us.
We're out of here.
I'm out here talking like I'm playing on the team. Don't tempt me.
On the way out, if you could hit the like button, we'd greatly appreciate it. And look, subscribing to the channel, I'm hooking you up. Honestly, it is a great channel with a lot of content. We had a great team out there, Simon Samano and Ken Hathaway, delivering for you guys during fight week. So even when it's not MMA related and it's boxing related with some MMA infusion in it, we were there. But you'll love the channel. Hit the subscribe button, the like button. It all help the trigger the algorithm, and it helps the show blow up. So really, I ask kindly of you if you could do that on the way out. We're out of here. Go out and be a champion. Enjoy your week. We'll see you next week.